Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Frequent Folk.
Do you want to go first since I went first last time, or will I go first again? Or what's the chat?
I can kick it off.
Cool.
Okay, so I do. It was probably relatively short. My word this time is frequent.
Ooh.
And just a word that I had written down on my phone because I have this like sort of ongoing note in my phone where I just shove words that I don't know what that means, but I don't have time right now to look it up. And then every now and then I go back to that. And, sometimes they're good and sometimes they're garbage and I delete them. And frequent was one of those ones where I just couldn't get my head around it, didn't know what it meant, couldn't figure out how it was constructed or whatever else. So I think I'm safe to say it's most commonly used as an adjective. Does that sound fair? Occurring often, but also as a verb. I frequent this place. To visit someplace often. So adjectival and verbal forms of frequent. There was a noun once way back when, but never really got off the ground. It didn't make much sense. These are both the adjective and verb use are among the first senses of this word. The adjective shows up in OED citations in the early to mid 1500s, like 1530s.
Oh, well, that's 50s. Much older than I would have thought. Okay.
And for the verb, it was actually in the late 1400s, so 1470s, 80s for the verb.
Okay.
But there was another earlier sense in addition to the sort of, because both the verb and the adjective that we use now have that sort of often, like a repeated thing happening multiple times, relatively close together, which is why it was also why we say something has a frequency. It's the same thing. But this other earlier sense, the OED puts it as, quote, of persons or an assembly, etc., assembled in great numbers, crowded or full.
Oh, okay.
Or of a place filled, full, or crowded. But it says with persons, rarely with things. So if a place, like you wouldn't say a drawer was frequented if it was stuff necessarily,
but a concept might be.
This gets complicated later on, but yeah. Although
most things do, Ryan. Most things do.
Yeah. And so that's the adjective. Like, you wouldn't describe a place as being frequent if it was full of stuff instead of people. But the verb had a transitive verbal sense where it did apply to things as well. So you'd say the shelves in someone's study were full of frequented books, as in books that have been crammed together onto the shelf.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't make much sense to me, but it's mostly just because it's an obscure, not used sense of it, and then that's why it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, sure.
But so that was the other sense. So we have these two. We have full or at capacity or something along those lines, or we have occurring often or repeated action, whatever.
Sure.
Now the word itself comes basically straight from Latin. So frequentum is the Latin word that it comes from. So no real shock or twist and turns there. And that makes sense in the time frame, like getting a lot of Latin words coming in the 1500s. Where it gets kind of interesting is that the double sense of either often or full/crowded sort of arrives, that's baggage it's taken with it on the journey from Latin to English.
Okay.
And so the this was one of the times I don't understand most of this book, but I like when I get to open it up and take a look at it. The Etymological Dictionary of Latin and Other Italic Languages.
I have so many books like this.
Is
where you're like,
is great.
I should read this book from start to finish. I am never going to read this book from start to finish.
No. And so it has an entry for the root word of frequentem, which is frequens, which it defines as occurring at close intervals. Now, at first blush, that seems to say, well, that's sorted then. It meant the more modern frequent, as in occurring at close intervals, repeated actions and stuff.
Sure.
But one of the derivatives in this is frequentare, which means to populate, occupy, or visit. So now we got a blending of the two, the verbal frequent as in to visit often, but also to populate or occupy, to fill up a place. But it also has infrequens, which means not crowded or absent.
Oh.
So it's
not infrequent as we would use it now, but the other infrequent.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
And you could see how that's the murkiness is kind of baked in, because of course if you do something infrequently, you're most often absent. But
yeah,
from that thing or place, but so it's still muddy between those two things. Now, the reason that this book is interesting to me and also obscure and sort of useless to my feeble mind is that it gets into stuff like, well, let's look at the Latin etymology.
Ooh.
So we're way past English. I'm already, I was out of my depth in English. So fairly warned BE, says I. But
dude, I have no idea what is swimming in the murky depths below me, but I'm not even aware that there is a bottom. That's how far out of my depth I am.
So going backwards from frequens, it offers two main options. So the first is that it relates to fraxare, Fraxare, which means, and this took me a bit, I did a double take here too, which means, quote, to go the watchman's rounds, or in Latin, vigiliam circuire. And that was, I just stared at the screen for a while going, what? As the small monkey in my brain just sort of stopped beating its cymbals and looked quizzically at the camera. It's, I think the best I can come up with is the sense of if you have a watchman or a patrol, that patrol is going to generally follow the same route, which means it will generally go to the same places again and again.
Yeah, it will come regularly
along that route. So maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
And so that one seems to lead more towards the sense of often or repeated. And the author of the Divan, the author of this Etymological Dictionary of Latin, he likes that one. He says there's an attractive semantic connection there, and he sort of,
we all love an attractive semantic connection. Let's face it.
Nothing wrong with that. Check out that semantically attractive connection. It's so he likes that. Without saying it, that's his preferred one, I think. The other option, though, that he does present is that, and this one, interestingly, the OED goes with this one, is that it connects to farcio or farcio, Farcio, meaning to fill completely or to stuff. And this one, yeah, so it still gets weirder. So Devon doesn't love this one, and he's got a lot of complex linguistic reasons why, like the way bilabial fricatives and plosives don't merge into one another as easily when it comes on this particular chain of the IE family tree and blah, 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 blah. Things I don't understand. Things Ryan, for real linguists.
I don't care if I understand it or not. Like, that was wonderful.
So he doesn't love that. He also says, the only possible cognate is a Greek verb that means to surround, which doesn't really semantically fit. It's hard to find the sense connection there. And he also says that if his conclusion for this one, for the fill completely or to stuff, is that the only way it makes sense to him is that it comes actually as a non-Indo-European source.
Right.
Somehow.
We're off the map, lads.
Which is a bit weird because the OED and Edam Online both, and for the OED to reference Proto-Indo-European is, for whatever reason, fairly rare, I think. I don't often see Pi roots being cited in the OED. But OED and Edam Online both refer to a Pi root that means to stuff. And in fact, the Farsio or Farcio is like the first example word of derivatives of that is the Latin word for a sausage.
Now, sausages are of uncertain etymology. Am I right in saying?
I think the word sausage, yeah. The English word sausage.
I have a dim recollection as an undergraduate English student of learning about satire and hearing that there is an etymological theory that satire has its roots in satis, as in satisfaction, which is the same sense of stuffing. And there's some mention of a sausage within this sort of theory of the etymology of the word satire.
I'm extremely happy that you brought that up because this Farsio or Farcio is where we get the word farce.
Ah!
And so...
Oh, that is interesting.
The connection there is that I guess a farce was initially not sort of it wasn't a standalone theatrical production or performance. It was like a comedic interlude in part of a larger event.
Right.
And so it was a goofy, over the top, pantomime, nutty bonkers, ridiculous thing in the middle of what I can only assume is an evening at the theater filled with blood and gore and death and horrible stuff.
I mean, I'd very much hope so.
Yeah. So that's why it gets the stuffed. It's like sort of a comedic interlude stuffed in the middle of a bunch of serious business. And so that's where that comes from. So that's cool. And it's interesting that it has like satire may have a similar sort of history. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting that the OED says the relation is to Farcio, meaning to stuff. And here's the Proto-Indo-European word that comes from. And I looked that up, and it shows up in both the American Heritage Dictionary and the University of Texas at Austin Picorni Master Proto-Indo-European Etymon and Index. And I know I left some words out of there because it's been a while since I've cited that. But that Pi root shows up in both those places. But
what
then Devon goes around.
Again?
It's something. It's like a B, BHRWEGH.
Okay. One of those guys.
So I think the best way to pronounce it would probably just to be punched.
Yeah. Someone along
like
those
if someone just punches you in the stomach out of nowhere, you're probably going to say that Proto-Indo-European word. So you're back to your roots, I
mean, I don't know. I just had a sudden absurd vision of a Proto-Indo-European speaker from the past looking at us going, fucking insensitive pricks. White people. Our words are too difficult to say, are they? Yeah,
exactly.
Like, just you make noises and approximate. Don't bother to actually learn.
Yeah.
And they would be right. But also they died a long, long time ago.
True.
So
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but we might be terrible pricks, but only if you're centuries old.
But we wouldn't be if you hadn't taken your secrets to the grave. Selfish.
This is true. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was weird that they said that there's a Proto-Indo-European root for this, but Devon says there can't possibly be a Proto-Indo-European root for this because it's not an Indo-European construction in the first place. But anyway, the I guess slightly unsatisfactory and unsatisfying answer to this journey that I found fairly satisfying on the way is that it apparently has literally never been clear whether the original was either this to stuff or to cram into a place So a place was frequented because it was very popular, and so it was very busy all the time, or it was frequented as in the people who go there often, I guess is.
I kind of love that.
Yeah, and now that doesn't change the fact that only one of those won out in the end, but it's interesting that that's how long it took for this to settle on one of those two options. Is you get all the way to like the 1600s before it really kind of becomes confirmed as the repetitiveness as opposed to the fullness. But yeah, so frequent.
That's super cool. Frequent. And you know, I was thinking also about frequency as in the scientific sense of the word, you know, the measurement of frequency, which is obviously about repetition and, you know, the number of times a thing happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is really interesting, because generally speaking, words that have do you ever find when you say things like generally speaking that you immediately lose all confidence in the thing you're about to say next?
100%.
It's like when you say I'm fairly sure, immediately your brain goes, nope.
Yeah.
You are not sure.
Oh,
you don't know anything.
You think you are, huh?
Like, listen to this idiot.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like you say, words often have several meanings, but for there to be two that are directly in competition, so to speak, you know, that are both being used, and there's no real clarity around which one's earlier or more common or, you know, sort of better, if you like, better in a sort of survival sense, for one to then disappear.
Yeah, and I kind of, it's also interesting because as all of these different, like the flash in the pan noun form, the adjective, the verb, then the words like frequency, like each one of those, it doesn't seem like any of them came from any of the other English ones. It's like people dipping back into Latin to pull in a slightly different interpretation of the Latin word and applying it to whatever they needed a word for.
Yeah.
But I sort of have this, and again, I have no reason to say this, but I'm gonna, is that I feel like it's plausible that the word frequency is what tipped the scales. Because
yeah, quite possibly.
When that comes in, when this whole thing comes in, we're in the 1500s, we're getting close to like the age of reason and the Enlightenment. And all of a sudden, scientific mumbo jumbo becomes very important culturally. And so it seems to me that then you get into the frequency of stuff and the frequency of this and the frequency of this, like that becomes this whole separate genre for this word to be used in with a very exclusive definition to it.
Yeah.
So it's pure speculation, but I feel like that makes sense in my head that might have been something that helped finally sort of sort it out.
Yeah, if words had agents, then that would be a pretty solid kind of marketing campaign for the for that particular meaning.
Yeah.
Cool.
So frequent.
So I've just realised that my microphone battery is getting low, so I'm just going to talk really fast.
Okay.
Because I'm usually so slow, measured and considered. My word this time around, it's so satisfying to know what the episode title is going to be for half the episode when the other person doesn't know. It's the little things, eh?
It is, yeah.
So the word that I'm going to look at today is folk.
Oh, nice.
Now, we've discussed many times how is it that we find the words that we talk about, and like you, I have a note on my phone somewhere within the 5 million notes I generally have on my phone, where occasionally a word will strike me and I won't have time to look at it in depth, but I'll be interested enough to write it down to then go back and have a look. And sometimes I have a lot of those on the go, and sometimes it's just one or two, and then other times there's the I love lamp solution.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a little bit of both, to be honest.
Okay.
And there's also the fact that folk etymology is a thing itself that we often talk about and very much enjoy. I had a couple of weekends ago, I had an unexpected injection into my life of a whole lot of really excellent folk music. And
Oh, cool.
I told you about this, and I found myself in a fairly unlikely place listening to a really, really fantastic pair of musicians. And they had songs from Newfoundland, from
Yeah.
Ireland, from Scotland, from France and Quebec, from Sweden.
Wow.
It was just a delightful smorgasbord of really, really lovely music, beautifully played and sung and performed, and it made me so happy. And then I, buoyed up by that experience, I went to a folk session in a local pub the next day, and pretty much the same thing happened. Great musicians, a real mix of people, lots of Scots and Irish folk music, and then a Welsh guy turned up, and he was like a shot in the arm to the whole thing, and it was super cool. So I've been listening to and thinking about and being interested in folk music a whole lot recently.
Cool.
And so when I was looking for a word to research, I thought, what about that one? And also, I felt like this word might be interesting, probably been around for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can see. So I had a look. I looked up in the wonderful Oxford English Dictionary, the definitive record of the English language. I was highly amused, last time we were talking about how like the OED is quite conservative and it's not willing to make wild leaps or theorise. I'm like, yeah, that's because it calls itself the definitive record of the English language. You can't just be like, serious work goes on here. It's evidence-based. We have dedicated researchers. And sometimes we just make shit up.
Yeah.
So,
once you've set yourself
anyway.
up for that, you're pretty much locked in.
There's kind of a bar and a standard and such like.
Yeah.
So the Oxford English Dictionary definition article, entry, holy shit, I completely lost that word. The entry, the first citation for it is from Beowulf. So
Ooh.
you don't get much older in terms of written citations. You don't get much older than that. You don't get any older than that. And the particular usage in Beowulf is a people, a nation, a race, or a tribe.
Right.
So
okay.
that's the first sense that's given. And that's then transferred by, it's around about 1382 from the Wycliffite Bible, the sense of this idea being transferred to animals. So a little hare,
interesting.
a folk. And so this idea of a type, a race, if you like, of animals being referred to as folk. And then we get an aggregation of people in relation to a superior, for example, God, a king or a priest, the great mass as opposed to an individual or the common people. And this is given as an obsolete usage or an archaic usage. Now, again, the first citation for that is around about 888 from Aelfried, translations of Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy. And this idea that, the kind of the common people, the ordinaries.
Yeah.
And then we get retainers, followers, servants, or work people. Again, that's given as an obsolete meaning. First cited in 1275 and enduring up to 1632, certainly in written form. And then sense 3, we get men, people, indefinitely. And people of a particular class, which is indicated by an adjective or some attributive. I felt like that was going to be attributive for a minute there.
It just keeps
attributive phrase. So again, this comes out in Old English, and it's used all the way up to 1882. So just people. And then we get the extension of that, individual persons or individuals. So to think it prudent for these young folks to settle, just using it as to mean people, guys, dudes, humans. So etymologically speaking, Germanic, so we get Old English folk, FOLC, Old Frisian, Old Saxon. The word stays fairly stable. We get V's for F's, which, is a common thing that happens. We got good old Church Slavonic,
nice.
Pluk, or Russian Polk, which is a division of an army. Pretty stable, pretty kind of clear. Etymonline notes that it is, according to Watkins. Watkins refers to the wonderfully named Calvert Watkins, who was the author of the American Heritage Dictionary of Indo-European Roots. Now, the whole text of that dictionary can be found online on the Internet Archive, which is wonderful. I would love to tell you that I dove deeply into it to actually understand what was going on, but much like the old etymological dictionary of Latin, not so much.
Right, yeah.
However, Watkins and various other notions have folk being an offshoot of the Proto-Indo-European root Pele, P-E-L-E. And the reason that I was so interested to ask about your Pi root from your word is I thought that we might have accidentally both been talking about cognate words. The word,
that would be cool.
The root Pele is to fill.
Oh,
So not in
interesting.
the sense to stuff. Obviously, you are looking at a different root. But, so Watkins has it as a suffix form of root Pele, to fill, which would make it cognate with Greek plethos, multitude or a people, and Latin plebes, the populace or the common people.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Now, that's quite interesting by itself. Okay, a lot of people, a multitude, a race, a group, like those people over there, that crowd. And I suppose if you're the sort of person who gets to decide who the words are and write things down, then you're probably in a slightly more privileged situation than those people over there, the many. And so you perhaps get to decide that it has this sort of shade of meaning. I also had a little look at the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Centre Indo-European Lexicon of Pi, Etymon and IE reflexes. And I don't think I've ever found a word with a Pi root with so many cognates. There are just tons. So the etymon given is pel or peli or ple. So the idea of filling, also to pour, or full. So in English we have words like, accomplish, acropolis, complement, psalm, plural, plenty, plenitude, surplus. And lots of these words are so very obviously words to do with filling or a sense that something is numerous. Metropolis. And within that we find folk. I was very pleased to find that folk comes directly after Folka, the 13th king of Rohan in The Lord of the Rings, followed by Folkred, who was also a prince of Rohan, followed by Folkwine, who was the 14th king of Rohan in The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien really was a dude, wasn't he?
He really was.
The kings of Rohan were folk, wonderfully enough. They also seem to have been quite numerous. So we get words like plebeian and plebiscite, the plebs, the common people. We get plenary, meaning full and complete. We get plethora, an excess of blood or an excess as it becomes of anything. We also get words like police and political.
Plethora started as specifically blood?
I believe so. That's the sense that's given by the University of Texas at Austin good people.
Interesting.
We then get the polys, any word with the Greek prefix poly, polymer, polydactyl, polystyrene, all those sorts of things. There are loads. Another favourite, good old Tolkien, we've got Winterfilth, which is part of the Shire's calendar. And I feel like I know when Winterfilth is. Because there's nice winter, there's romantic, cold, isn't it beautiful? Maybe it's snowy. Crisp, and then there's Winterfilth, where everything is fucking grey and damp and cold and slush happens and you just wish it would end.
Yeah, 100%.
So we have a whole lot of folk interestingly enough. A really nice one listed on Etym Online in the list of cognates from this pirate is gefilte fish, which is it's given here as not a species but a loaf made of various kinds of ground fish and other ingredients. The first word is Yiddish from German gefühlte, which means stuffed. So the full becomes gefilt from that pel or full or full root all the way back in Proto-Indo-European. And then, of course, we get so many compound words: folk art, folk belief, folk club, folk comedy, folk drama, folk etymology, folk literature, folk memory. Also, we could go on and on and on and on and on. We have also the folk, often capitalised, the fairy folk. The OED notes, interestingly, folk of peace is often given to describe the fairy folk of legend, which is a mistranslation of a Gaelic phrase. I won't attempt to pronounce Irish Gaelic, because I don't know how.
Right, yeah.
And people do speak this language, and let's not piss them off. Let's try and not piss off too many people who are still alive. It's my general kind of... And the actual... Life motto. The phrase is, in fact, people of the fairy hill, or people of the hill. It notes that the Irish phrase meaning banshee is also a mistranslation. So the idea of peace within that isn't really part of the Irish linguistic original.
Right.
But, the fairy folk, this is a kind of an enduring not etymological. I've lost my words. I've just got too many things happening in my life right now. It's this sort of legendary, mythological notion.
Right. Yeah.
And a whole lot of things to fill it up with, which I thought was rather lovely, because much like frequent, this idea of, is it about how many people there are, or is it about this sort of sense of the kind of class or rank or standing? You can kind of take whichever one you like. And for me, when it comes to folk music, I don't know, do quote unquote real musicians look down on folk music? I certainly hope not, because that seems to me a little bit snobbish and not really based on anything. I certainly have seen and experienced and heard many, many super duper talented, crafts people playing and performing folk music. But also I really love the idea that it's for everybody, as numerous as the Kings of Rohan or the multitudes that whoever was writing the words down was talking about.
That's very cool. I like one of my relatively recent discoveries. So it's a new musical genre to me, although I'm late to this party as always. I don't even know why I was on Wikipedia, but I saw a reference to folk metal, and I went, yes, please.
Yeah.
So bands like Skyclad and a bunch of these other ones that are like blending fiddles and blast beats, and it's amazing.
I mean,
so
personally,
folk metal is awesome.
I'm up for hearing anything blended with blast beats.
Yeah,
bring
100%.
that shit on.
It was so that's pretty great. I also like there's an element of pleasingness to the fact that kind of the plebeian class is kind of defined at its core by the fact that there are more of them.
Never forget. This is when I was a teacher, I used to talk about this. Sometimes I would talk to classes about this, but not every class.
No.
Because what you learn very quickly, and what they don't really seem to learn, the kind of social contract of classroom teaching is the lie that one person is in charge.
Yeah.
Like, it's not every class to whom I would point out. You do realise if you all decided one day not to do the things I tell you to do, there's basically nothing I could do about that.
Yeah, like everything happens by consent.
Yeah.
So it's
sometimes I would talk to classes about this, and just seeing that realization dawn on their little faces, like, oh, we could really fuck some shit up.
Yeah. Yeah, you would have to be careful with which classes you introduce that concept to.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's, you know, it's both. I live in two countries currently being ruled by people who were not elected.
Right.
Parties who represent parties, in one case, I didn't vote for. And in political and social situations that are really quite shit as a result of those parties and those politics. And basically, viva la revolution, as far as I'm concerned. I feel like the current political landscape of Britain and Scotland, we have, and you know, this is something we've kind of talked about recently. We have a system of election which is guaranteed to give you shitty candidates.
Yeah.
It's pretty much guaranteed. If you're a person who quote unquote makes it as a career politician is not a person that I want to be in charge of shit.
No, elections are the worst ways of finding rulers.
The very worst.
Because they just...
But at the same time, nobody else wants those jobs. And all those hundreds of thousands and millions of people who are more numerous, actually corralling them into any sort of direction is really fucking hard work. Another thing you learn as a teacher, if you have 30 people in front of you who really don't want to do the things that you want them to do, whew, it's going to be a hard shift.
Yeah. Best of luck.
But yeah, and I do find I listened recently to a very lovely, come at me internet, I'm not a mad keen fan of English folk music. Traditional English folk music. There are lots of really wonderful English folk musicians, but I tend to listen more to sort of modern folk musicians from England rather than traditional English folk. And my friend, who is from Cumbria, which is a fascinating place from a linguistic standpoint, he recently let me hear a track that is called A Place Called England. And it's really lovely. It sounds like a very traditional English folk tune, but it is about a modern person looking back on this kind of shared history and saying, well, I think I know what that place is, but it's not always obvious to everybody else that place still exists here. And it has a wonderful verse about welcoming anyone to make England their home wherever they happen to have been born. All they have to do is love freedom and love English soil. Those are the kind of prerequisites. And I'm like, politically, folk music is something that I identify with. It's about people. It's about communities. It's about looking after each other and having a sense of a kind of a moral compass within a community. And that's something that I can very much get behind.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, frequent folk. And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.